Hello, I'm Jenefer, founder of Silk Helix, and in this video we're talking about social media in the workplace. Over the last 10 years, I have written article after article changing the way that we advise and we think and we talk about social media. And over that time, even more so, we've changed the way social media policies are written, what they contain, what we should think about. I mean, I still remember the days we were just banning it and IT departments were just going, no, we're not accessing any social media. Clearly, the world has moved on. We are not in that place anymore. We are in an embrace it. Businesses are using it. People have got a smartphone in their pocket. IT can ban what they like, and people are just walking around with a smartphone. So the world has changed. So what do we need to think about today? If we're embracing it, do we really need a social media policy anymore? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain all. Number one, in my view, is training. And it is the most missed part of thoughts around social media. I don't know very many companies that are doing it at all, especially not small businesses. But in my opinion, it's absolutely up there. It's an absolute must. The reason I think that is because social media means different things to all of us. The platforms are all different. Our own experiences on each of the platforms are different because the algorithms are about targeting us as individuals. How we use a platform will impact what we experience of a platform. Whether we use social media for learning, whether we use it to talk about our day, whether we use it because we're interested in campaigning and thoughts around particular things that we might want to talk about, or whether we're marketeers and we understand how we use it for marketing, all of these things are different uses of social media and different ways that we interpret how we should use it, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. There is no common sense when it comes to this should go on social media or this shouldn't go on social media. It just doesn't exist because the interpretations are so wildly different. I mean, just to give an example, I was working with a salon client and they had an apprentice who was working in the business was talking about colour formulas that they use. Now, this youngster was quite keen to make herself an influencer in her industry, which is great. And she was watching other influencers and she's seeing other influencers, top celebrity stylists and things, sharing their formulas. So she went and shared the formula that she'd use. But actually, in their circumstance, in the salon that she's working in and where they are at, that's not appropriate. That's confidential business formulas that they don't want put out there on social media. It enables somebody to take that formula and go to their hairdresser down the road and say, could you do this for my hair? Now, that's fine. If you're a celebrity stylist and you're not looking for Joe Blogs to come to you, you're giving away your formulas. That's fine because people want to copy and follow celebrities. It's not fine when you're a more local business and when you need people coming to you and that's your secret sauce. So understanding what can and can't go out on social media is really important. For the younger generation, they've been brought up with social media. They have been brought up having every part of their life documented by their parents. And then they've gone into it. So when they come into work, they may well document their first day of employment. Now, some employers will want that. Some employers are sending out welcome packs for the pure aim that that person will feel like they want to announce on LinkedIn that they've joined. They've got this great welcome pack. It's covered in branding. And that's great. There are other employers who don't want somebody to announce in that way that their first day or talk about their first day, or maybe the first day is not quite so social media friendly. So training becomes really important because it's not common sense. What's your view and how you're using it in your business and how you want your people using it and whether or not you want them to support you, whether you see your entire team as part of the marketing team effectively and supporting you on social media, or whether you don't want people doing that because you're concerned about competition and things, you've got to tell people. So absolutely, part of your induction, social media training, top of the agenda, and redo it. Remind people what is and isn't expected of them. What does it mean for your business? And if you want people to be brand ambassadors, you want people to be talking about your brand on social media, then you've still got to give them training. You've got to talk to them about brand messages, what is appropriate to put out there, what isn't, how do you want things put out there. Encourage people, support people in their use of social media. So number one, training. Don't forget it. Make it part of your induction. Really be clear with people what isn't expected. Number two then is your social media policy. This should support your training. So whatever you're training in should be backed up by your policy, in terms of your policy saying, well, this is expected, this isn't expected. Cover the, look, don't say anything derogatory. And if you do, there's a potential that obviously we could dismiss for gross misconduct. I would actually go into, if you say something that harms our brand, that could also be dealt with under disciplinary procedure. I would also go into recommendations like having 2FA on all your social media, even your private social media accounts. One of the reasons for that is that we've seen a few high profile cases where an employee has posted something particularly controversial or offensive on a social media platform. That's then been identified by others, shared, gone viral, even gone into the mainstream media. And then whilst it's not done through their employer's linked, their employer's then pressure is put on the employer to be able to deal with the individual and deal with the views that they're expressing. Often those views are in breach of things like equal opportunities, bullying, harassment policies. And then what we all see is the individual will say, oh, my account got hacked, or somebody else got access to my account. So one of the things I like to make sure is covered in a social media policy is that the individual is always responsible for what's on their social media. It's their responsibility to make sure that they've got high levels of security, and that will include things like multi-factor authentication to make sure that their accounts are protected. So that's why I think you should have a social media policy. Unfortunately, it is kind of the negative side of it is about being able to deal with issues if and when they happen. But if we don't make that clear in a policy, it makes it almost impossible to deal with those issues as and when they happen. Most of the time, and it's why I talked about training first, it's about the positives. It's about talking to people about what they should do, what they can do. And I would make a policy even very much leading on that point. So it's a more positive document. I would have it in the employee handbook personally, but it's there, it backs up, it protects the company. I think it's really important to have it there. Point three is specifically about WhatsApp as a channel, as a communication channel. I've heard debates about whether it is or isn't social media, but I'm including it in here because for a lot of small businesses, they're choosing to use WhatsApp as a communication tool for colleagues within the team, within the business. There are some key problems with this. And there's an article specifically about WhatsApp. The link is in the description below that goes into the data protection side of it. But the key issues are twofold. One is the data protection. So when you invite somebody into a WhatsApp group and you share information out through that group, that information is then stored on their device. And now with the way WhatsApp is set up, it could be on multiple devices. So they could be out of the home, for example, have left their computer on with WhatsApp on it, that your confidential information is then available to others. You can easily forward messages out of it. You can invite others to join groups. And then crucially, once somebody leaves the business, your information is still stored on their device. So yes, you can take them out of the group, but they've still got the history of that group. They've still got all the information there. So from a data point of view, if you're using it for more than a social channel and you're using it to share, say, company data, I've seen companies that are using it to share like sales data, performance data, all those things, that can be problematic in terms of your data security. The other issue that we've seen with WhatsApp is that it's a personal communication channel. And what this means is that People use it, it's on their phone, it's their personal channel. They're using it to speak to their partners, their friends, their family. And that means that they're in WhatsApp when they're not working. Yes, you can turn off the notifications for a particular group. So if you're in a work group, you can turn off notifications for that. But when you go into WhatsApp, you still see that little number that tells you how many messages are unread. The specific example that we've come across is two people who were working effectively together, so had to communicate with each other, but never worked the same shift. They were always working opposite shifts. So what this meant is when one person was at work, they were then sending messages out to the other person who wasn't at work, and vice versa. And when those messages were either criticisms or at least could be read as criticisms, or were that meant that when the person's not at work, they're still receiving that. They're still receiving questions about work. They feel like they've got to respond because this other person is at work trying to get on with the task. They feel like they're being got at because this person has said, well, you didn't do that yesterday. So there's kind of this feeling of being got at and bullied. Effectively, we got a complaint around bullying from it. It means that individuals have got no way of switching off. So when you've got a channel like Slack, for example, that's a specific work channel, yes, you could choose to put it on your phone, but you can also choose not to have it on there. You can choose to be away from work, to go home and not think about work. Whereas when you're using WhatsApp as communication, you take away people's ability to be able to step away from work and say, actually, I'm not being part of these conversations. I'm not at work right now. They're effectively not released from work in their own home. So that is the problems that we see with WhatsApp. We're increasingly seeing that resulting in grievances because people feel like there's no getting away from it, alongside the data protection issue. So WhatsApp, very specifically, think about whether or not that really is the appropriate channel for having confidential business discussions or even team chats. The fourth point, I'm not coming across this one quite so much anymore as I used to. But it is still worth putting in there because it still comes up as an issue. And this is the question: what happens if my employees spend all day on social media? And this is the kind of the age-old question of people wasting time. Doesn't matter what they're doing, if they're not working, or they appear not to be working, it causes frustration. You can see them on their phones, you can see them doing other things. The challenge these days, of course, is that our phones often create or just used as an additional screen in what we're doing, or we may well be using social media as part of our normal working day, so the overlap between home and work becomes much more blurred. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter what people are doing to waste time or not work or not achieve. Actually, when we start focusing on that, it becomes really hard to deal with, and it's always a symptom of a bigger issue. If you're able to really know what you expect of people, what they should be achieving, what good looks like, and you can see that and you can measure it and you can know whether or not it's happening, then you're in a much better place to deal with any reason somebody isn't performing. If they're performing, if they're achieving everything they need to do, if the customers are getting a great experience, if their outputs are exactly what you expect them to be, then it doesn't matter what they're doing on social media or in their own time, or because you're getting what you need out of them. So be really focused when you think about things around kind of or wasting time on social media. I would actually take it out of that equation and start looking at performance, how you measure that, and how you know whether or not people are performing. One specific example that we do get is people using phones in front of customers in an experience where actually the customer should be the person that person is solely focused on during that time, and the individual's kind of getting their phone out, sneaking a look. Yes, that's going to be problematic, and that's where it comes into your training as part of your induction. It comes through talking about the customer experience, explaining to people how and why you want the customer to experience that sole focus, and why customer service is really important, what good customer service looks like. And then actually that's your focus, is again, it's your outcome, it's what great customer service looks like, as opposed to don't look at your phone. So you're focusing on the positive in terms of how you talk about it and how you push it. And then our final point that does come up is the someone's called in sick, and then we've seen pictures of them on Facebook out partying, doing something. Usually it's a colleague that's a little bit annoyed because they've picked up extra work and they've now seen these pictures. They come in and tell us about it. So it is still an issue, and these are the reasons why you still need a social media policy, because it does make it clear kind of what's expected, what's not expected, and that obviously you can discipline based on things that you've seen on social media. So yes, if somebody has called in sick and lied about it, then yes, you could deal with that through the disciplinary process, but you need to make sure that you've done a full and thorough investigation. Just because a picture appeared on Facebook yesterday does not mean it was taken yesterday. That's the first thing to bear in mind. We need to be able to evidence that that picture was taken at the place, at the time that they were off sick. Now, I did deal with a case once where an employee said they were sick for a whole week with a bad back, but prior to that had told colleagues they were planning to go away, and actually on Facebook tagged themselves in foreign cities during that week on their holiday. Right, so these things do happen. We do have to deal with them occasionally. It's disappointing, but we do. So we have to check first to make sure that what we're seeing, the evidence we've got, really does represent that they were doing something else whilst they told us that they were off sick. We also have to think about what sickness means and what they were doing. Right? And what I mean by this is being too sick to work doesn't necessarily mean bedbound and stuck in your home. There are lots of reasons why being off sick, we may still have to go out and about. So let's say we're off sick, but there's nobody else to support us, nobody else around who can go and buy our food to our supermarket shop, right? And the colleague then sees you in the supermarket and is like, "You're off sick. You're meant to, like, what are you doing here?" Well, okay, I'm too sick to do a full day of work, but I needed milk. Like, we needed food for dinner tonight. Like, the kids need feeding. Some of those things still have to happen, and that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody was lying about being too sick to work. And the same applies with seeing pictures of people on Facebook. Let's say it's a mental health issue, for example. It may actually be good for somebody's recovery for them to go out, to socialise, to see other people. If they sit at home in bed, then that could worsen their situation. It's not encouraging them to get out, to heal. And a walk, for example, can be beneficial. As I say, socializing can be really beneficial. So really just think about what we actually seeing on social media and why were they off sick, and does that really indicate that they lied to us? Being too sick to work doesn't mean that we're stuck in bed at home. It is becoming so much harder to write articles about social media, to write social media policies, to do things like this, because it really does feed into everything we do now. It's not an exclusive thing that sits on the side that we talk about what we had for breakfast. That's not what social media is anymore. So it does become much more business focused. It becomes much more about your business, what's right for you, what you need. And that's why social media policies are so important. It's why training is so important, because the situation will be different for you as it will be for the business down the road. And therefore it will be different to what the employees experienced at a previous business and what you want from them now. So being really clear about that is so important. And I do really recommend that, if nothing else, you put some training into your induction and that you make sure you've got a social media policy.